What if you could give recruiters a number to call and they speak to your digital twin? Your voice, your career history, available 24/7. I'm Zubin's digital twin. What would you like to know about my professional background? Hey, where are you working at the moment? And how long have you been an engineer? Sure, happy to share that. I am currently head of developer relations and experience at Cartesia, starting April 2026. I have been a software engineer since around 2019, so roughly 6 years. Now, in my last video, I showed you how to get started with exactly such a voice agent, a fully functioning voice agent with its own phone number that you can give to recruiters or anybody else who you want to know about your history. In this video, we're going to extend that application using some Python code to make it even more useful and to use more things like tools. It can use that to read your resume file, to search social media, even send emails. Before we start, there are a few prerequisites. You can get a solid picture of this by going to the Voice Agent Quick Start here with the Cartesia docs, and it covers all the stuff: how to set up your Cartesia API key, how to install the CLI, make sure you use Python 3 and UV as the package manager, and initialize a new project with UV so that it has the virtual environment and dependencies correctly set up. And if you're following along on this video, everything you read will be in the README link in the description, and it should take you a few minutes max to set it up. Now, I've actually built this project out, so when you look at the GitHub repo, it will have much more than what you're going to see right now. And that's because right now, in my IDE, I've checked out an older commit just to show you what it looks like layer by layer. Our goal for phase one is pretty simple. We're just going to take that LinkedIn PDF document we had, we're going to put it in the code base, and then we're going to make sure that the agent knows how to use the right agent tool to read that file exactly when it needs. So to start with, let's take a look at the .env.example file here, and you'll see that at this stage, the only thing you need is an Anthropic API key. Now, I'm using Anthropic, but you can use any light LLM supported AI provider that you want. Now, when you do the quick start from the Cartesia docs for line agents, you will see that the project will be called My Voice Agent, but what we will call it is the digital twin. So just keep that in mind. And if you follow this quick start correctly, you will end up with a main file that looks like this. And if you look at main.py, you'll see that it has a very simple get agent, a voice agent app that's initiated. I quickly test this out without really using voice, but using the server and making sure that the agent's actually working in that it's sending the correct responses. We can just run uv run py, and this will make sure that it compiles. And then on the right, we can do, assuming you've installed the Cartesia CLI, you can do Cartesia chat. And at port 8000, which is where we are serving, and now it'll say, hi, hello, how can I help you? Which is exactly what happened here. That's the introduction text. And so now we know that at least the app is working and it's responding. It's at least saying the introduction and it's compiling correctly. Now, since no one actually likes watching somebody type code, what I've done is I've just checked out the next commit, which you can see is this one here, right? And in this commit, we're going to have to take a look at some of the changes we've made to main.py. So what you'll see here is that I've given it the clone ID from the Cartesia playground. Now, you'll remember that the Cartesia playground has all my voice clones in the voice library here. So for example, we can just go to my voices, and you can take the demo and you can copy the ID like this. And that's what you end up getting as this voice ID here, right? So that's the first thing we set. Nothing else has really changed for the moment. And I'll walk through some of the other stuff, but you'll see here that we also added a prompt and we've changed the introduction to what we had in the first video. If you followed along where we did this all in the playground, it says, hi, I'm the digital twin. What would you like to know about my professional background? Now let's take a look at how we actually inject the voice ID. How do we tell Cartesia's text-to-speech voice model that it should use the voice clone ID? Well, we do something called a pre-call result, right? So we create a pre-call handler function here, and then we pass that pre-call handler function to the voice agent app when we initiate it. Now, if you've done the quick start, you'll understand what the voice agent app is, but for those of you who haven't, the voice agent app is really the central control interface for the voice agent, right? You pass it a get agent function, which connects to an LLM agent of your choice that has a system prompt, and that also has the introduction text. So this is how your agent gets connected to your system, and so how you control and inject events and all the rest of that. You also give it a pre-call handler, like I've just mentioned, which tells it, hey, use the latest Sonic 3.5 model, which, by the way, is a benchmark topping, and I'm talking about artificial analysis is benchmarks. It's a benchmark topping model called 3.5, right? Incredibly realistic, very, very good, very low latency, and very high accuracy. So you give it the voice clone ID, you give it the Sonic 3.5 model, and you say you want the Sonic 3.5 models only, and it makes sure that your voice is actually running that. Now, you give it the pre-call handler and you give it the agent, and therefore your voice agent app is actually ready to run. But before we run it, let's take a look at this prompt, right? So this prompt is in a prompt.py file. And all I did was copy and paste it from my Cartesia playground, which you'll remember in the voice agents demo that we did in the previous video, we had this entire system prompt here, right? All I did, guys, was copy it and put it in here. And so Now it's going to have all the information that was previously in the prompt here. And all we've really done is we've connected our clone voice. Now, one more thing, when you're in the quick start, you'll see this line about running Cartesia init, right? And then after you run init, you get to choose whether you create a new or connect to an existing one. I'd recommend you create a new one and call it digital twin, which is what I've done. What Cartesia init does is it initializes some configuration for a Cartesia voice agent, and you can choose to create a new voice agent or give it a name. You can see that the configuration ends up being put into your actual project. So you can see a .cartesia config toml file, and in that you have an agent ID once you deploy, which will actually match up to what we see in the dashboard in a moment. And you'll also see a Cartesia toml file here, which has other configurations. The really important one here is the config.toml under the .cartesia file, because that one has your agent voice ID. And if you go to the playground, it'll end up being the one that you deployed, right? So this will have the same voice ID because I chose to do it as a new one, and you'll see it's the one ending FYE, and you'll see it's the one here ending FYE. Now, this is how Cartesia knows, or the CLI knows, which voice agent you're actually dealing with and you're writing code for. You can also see the status of this agent. For example, when you run Cartesia status and you give it the agent number, well, it's auto-completing here for me. That's great. So I'm just going to do that. And it tells me that, well, the agent is called digital twin. That's the ID. We already know that. It has a pin version, which is the latest version that's been deployed, etc. And it'll tell you a little bit more. You can even click to this and go directly to the agent if you want, which is what we did when we accessed it here. Now, when you do this, you will also notice that you have an environment field, and that has the API key that you put in your .env file. Now, make sure that your .env file is properly git ignored, okay? Make sure it's actually git ignored. Okay, so at this point in time, we have the new prompt, and we've got the ability to use our clone voice. We will try that out in a moment, but what we're going to do here is just make sure that the app actually compiles and it runs. So I'm just going to do uv run main. And on this window, I'm going to make sure that we do Cartesia chat at port 8000. And we're going to say, hey, where did you work in 2020 during the pandemic? Okay, let's see what happens. And it should look up the details and tell me correctly. Yep, that's actually absolutely correct. So we know it's working. The only question is this going to be there in our voice? Let's find out. So I've cleared the console. And what I'm going to do is just do a Cartesia deploy. And that's going to deploy the current state of my application, my voice agent, to the Cartesia hosted environment. And we'll see, if we go to deployment, we'll see that it was deployed just now, and it's going to take a few seconds to build and get ready. Now we know its status is deployed, is showing green. Let's call it and see what happens. Hi, I am Zubin's digital twin. What would you like to know about my professional background? Hi, I just wanted to check what you were doing during the year 2020 and 2021 during the pandemic. I joined Google as a software engineer in 2020, where I worked until 2022. That covered my pandemic years. Okay, clearly it works, and you could hear my voice there, and it sounded all right. Excellent. So now it's working. It's correctly reading from my prompt, and most importantly, it's in my voice now. Now that we know that we've correctly hooked up our voice ID and it's actually speaking in our voice, we need to give our digital twin some additional tools. Now, before we progress any further, we need to add a package called PyPDF. So you just do uv add PyPDF in your terminal and you install that package. Once we install that, now our code has the ability to load the PDF profile that we added here from LinkedIn, right? So this is how we give it a resume or a PDF download from LinkedIn or a mix of both, the multiple documents. Now, you may want to use whatever documents you want to give the voice agent the information it needs to answer questions. And the next step after that is to write a tool that you can give to the agent so that it can read your files, right? So I've done a simple read resume tool here, which uses the PyPDF package that we just imported. And it basically says that, it looks for the file path, which is the resume PDF here to profile PDF. And then it loads that PDF. It then extracts the text from it, and it joins that as one large string, right? So this function returns a string. And you'll see it's annotated with loopback tool. Cartesia's line SDK, if you look at it here under SDK in the docs, under tools, you'll see that there are three types of tools. Right? There are three types of tools. There's loopback, there's pass-through, and handoff. I'll let you look at the documents, but what we use is a loopback tool, which basically means that the tool's result is sent back to the LLM, which can then continue generating the response. Now, looking back at the tool, you'll see that we have an unused variable, an unused parameter here, the context. All tools are passed a context object that has the tool env type, which has contextual information about the agent, the current conversation turns, and things like knowledge base and so on, things that we're not really using yet. Right, in our tool. Okay, now next, we need to tell our agent that this tool even exists. So we need to go down to main.py, and you see where we've declared our agent here. We will just add the read resume tool to it. Make sure that you've imported it at the top, and then make sure you give it in the tools array, the list, to the LLM agent so that it knows that it has this tool available. And you'll see that the tool explains what it does, right? It says, read the resume PDF and return its full text content. This docstring is important so that the agent knows what it's going to be able to use this tool for. Now, you may think we're done. We've written a tool, we've given it to the agent, but there's one important gotcha to remember here. Our prompt needs to be updated, right? We need to make sure that the prompt no longer has information about ourselves in it. What I've done is I've taken out all the previous information that was there about work history, and I've just said, use the read resume tool. I've also called out here in tools that there is a read resume tool and given it a little bit more information about when and how to use it. And I've also added some information that's not there in my LinkedIn PDF about the podcast that I do and I used to do and my Spotify stuff and YouTube stuff and all that stuff, right? So this is additional information that still sits in the prompt that's not in my LinkedIn profile, but then my LinkedIn profile also gets read using this tool because the LinkedIn profile is now in this PDF document here. Okay, now let's test drive this. So what are we going to expect once we actually deploy this to Cartesia's hosting infrastructure? Well, I've taken out from the prompt information about me. So I expect a tool call, but we can actually check that very quickly here. But what I'm going to do is I'm first going to do a Cartesia deploy so that it deploys in the background, right? And then that continues to load on the hosting infrastructure. And then here locally, what I'll do is I'll just do a UV run by, and I'll make sure that it's actually reading and correctly calling the tool. When I do Cartesia chat at 8,000, we should now be able to see when I say something. Tell me about Zubin's work during 2010. Okay, now that's a long time ago. And let's just quickly, just so that you understand, there is nothing here about 2010 or any other specific year. In fact, I've just said use the read resume tool. So what we're expecting is this thing should read the resume. Now my LinkedIn PDF is quite long, and so it's going to fill up the screen quite a bit, but we'll scroll up and see that we've seen this tool call. Okay, you can see this is all the information from my LinkedIn PDF. And the agent replied and said, well, I was wrapping up my time at Baker & McKinsey. Now let's take a quick look by scrolling up to the top to see the actual agent call. Okay, when you scroll up through the 8 pages, you'll see that it did do a tool call for read resume, and it said, let me pull up my resume to get those details for you, before it actually then read all that, sent it to the LLM, got the response. And now let's make sure that this is actually deployed. So if I go back to the playground, you'll see that it was deployed 2 minutes ago. Great, let's try and call it and make sure that it's working. Hi, I'm Zubin's digital twin. What would you like to know? Hi there, tell me what you were doing in the year 2010 or so. Let me pull up my resume to get those details for you. Around 2010, I was wrapping up my role as an associate at Baker & McKinsey, focused on mergers and acquisitions and corporate advisory. I then joined Telstra as legal counsel for their enterprise. Thank you. That's enough. Bye. Goodbye. It was great chatting with you. Take care. Okay. So clearly it works. And that was in my voice and it read the resume. You can actually go and check how your calls have done and whether there's a tool call by going to the actual playground dashboard, going to calls, clicking on the most recent call that you want to diagnose, take a look at logs. And now we know the tool is called read resume, right? So let's see, it did load the tool. Let's click to the next find of that. And it did say tool called read resume. You can also listen to the entire call here if you like. You can even see transcript. And if you did do something called metrics, which is different and we're not covering in this video, you could see that over here as well. But you can actually even look through the transcript if you wanted and search through the transcript, etc. So if I look for the word Baker, you'll see that the agent, the digital twin, responded with this particular dialogue. You can even listen to it if you want over here, and so on and so forth. This is a really powerful tool and very powerful dashboard for you to quickly get used to how to use voice agents and how to diagnose stuff. Okay, so we know that the cloned voice is being used. We know that it's no longer relying on just the prompt. It's now also loading resume or whatever other PDF file we give it as part of the runtime context into the voice agent. Next, let's step it up a little bit further. Let's add web search and web extract tools. For this, you're going to need a Tavily account. It's free. You can go and get a free API key as well. So sign up at tavily.com. And then from the dashboard, you can get your API key. And then we will add, you guessed it, a tool for calling Tavily. First, we do need to install the correct packages to use these tools, especially Tavily. And you'll see we've installed the Python Tavily package, and we've also installed LogGuru. We just did that with UV add. And now we need to take a look at tools, because this is where a lot of the action is. There are 2 tools that we had to declare for Tavily. One is web search and one is web extract, which gets called when the agent wants to pull info out of specific URLs or look up specific URLs that a user may mention. We've added the tools to the existing tools.py file. We've given a extract max characters variable over here that just says, for the web extraction, cap it, truncate it at about 3,000 characters. This is so that we're not getting massive amounts of text. And we've declared both the Tavily tools inside a Tavily class, One, of course, is the loopback tool, which is web search, and the other one's also loopback, which is web extract, right? And if you read the file, you'll see what it does. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it basically uses the Tavily API to pull out information from the web. Pretty powerful stuff. Now, don't forget, we need to update main.py to make sure that it has these tools. So here in the tools call to the LLM agent or the tools array, I've given it Tavily Web Search and Tavily Web Extract. And just as important, don't forget to update the prompt. We've told the prompt that you have certain tools. There's the Web Search and the Web Extract tool that's available. Also, very importantly, we want to update this line that previously in our prompt said, don't fabricate and don't use anything outside of this prompt. We've changed that to if something isn't in this prompt or return data from tools, then just say you don't have that detail. So we've not forbidden the agent from going outside this prompt. We've only said use the tools and never fabricate. If you don't know and it's not returned by a tool call, then just say you don't have that detail. And again, the other stuff is pretty straightforward. And finally, when we're answering questions about Zubin, we wanted to use the read resume and other available tools to get specific details when needed. I should just actually change that there. And then we have some other information that may or may not be useful, which will probably supplement from the internet anyway doing a web search. Okay, now we have made sure that the prompt doesn't have the information about us and we're relying on the tools entirely. And always, I'm going to just fire up the dev server here locally. But before I do that, I'm going to do Cartesia deploy so that it deploys in the background while we fire up the app and chat with it in text locally first. So I'm going to do UV run py in this window. And in this one, I'm going to do Cartesia chat at 8,000. Now let's try and test that it actually is calling a web search. So I could say something like, tell me about Zubin's podcast activity in the last 12 months or so. And I would expect a tool call to the web search, maybe even a web extract if it needs to look up a URL. And you'll see it's responded here with some information about my podcast and about other podcasts I've been on. And let's just quickly check. Actually, we'll do it on the UI, right? We'll check on the UI whether or not the web search tool call was done. So let's move over to the deployment dashboard and see what the status is. This is important because I screwed up and I want to share this with you so that you know how to debug this. It says that my deployment failed, right? The one that I just deployed while I showed the text version of it. And if you look at it, if you click at any one of these, it'll say that there was readiness check that failed. And it said that if you look through the logs, it'll say, aha, the Tavily API key was not set. But it ran locally for me. And that's because the Tavily API key was actually in my local environment in my .env file. Now, the Cartesia CLI has a fantastic tool to make sure. And I'm going to just open my env example file here. Right now, I've got these two, right? I've got Anthropic and I've got the Tavily API key. Now, my actual .env file has the full values in it. And Cartesia has a pretty cool tool using the Cartesia CLI where you can basically synchronize what's in your .file up into the dashboard. And I'll show you how this works. So you know that if you go to the environment, right now, we've only got the Anthropic API key here, and that's its value. Now, you can set Tavily API key here if you want, right? You could do this right here. That's one way to do it. Or the CLI, what we can do is Cartesia n set from the env file. We can tell the Cartesia CLI to just upload whatever's on our .env file securely to the Cartesia hosting environment. You'll also see that when you do this, it says that if there was a previous deployment, a new one will be auto-created, which is great because we know that my previous deployment did fail. Once I send this key, it's automatically going to deploy. So you don't need to even do the next deploy step anymore. It'll automatically do it for you. And then if you go to the environment dashboard, you'll see that your Tavily API key is in fact set here. And now, if you go back to deployments, we will see it was deployed just now after the failure, right? So let's give this one a call and make sure it's doing a web search and look for that tool. Hi, I am Zubin's digital twin. Hi there. Would you like to know? Can you tell me about podcasts or other appearances that Zubin may have done or any useful content that Zubin may have produced on the internet in the last 6 to 12 months? Let me search for that information right now. The most notable recent appearance is FreeCodeCamp Podcast, episode 203, published January 9th, 2026. Okay, so now we know it's definitely looked it up. We know it's looked up, well, it sounds like it's looked up the internet because that was not actually in my resume PDF document. It's not on the LinkedIn PDF. But let's go and take a look at the call. So let's check whether or not it called the tools on the actual dashboard. So if you go to logs and we look at, well, we could just search for tools. We'll see that, yep, these are all the tools that were loaded. Good web search was also there. And then it did actually call the web search tool in a few places, right? And so you can also look for web search if you want, and we'll see all the places in which it was called. Tools web search was called, right? Lastly, don't forget that you can click on get phone number, and Cartesia's hosting environment will provision you with a US number that you can hand out to people and have them call anytime you need. Just make sure that you add your billing and set it up correctly so that your digital twin is always available anytime someone calls 24/7. Your digital twin is now working. It can look up the internet. It can look up the PDF file that you've given it. And if you've given it more than one, you just need to modify the code a little bit to make sure it reads all those files. And there you go. You've got a fully functional digital twin that you can give to folks. And it looks up real-time information on the web if you need. You can adjust the prompt to tell it to do that. You can adjust the way the Tavily tool call does to do that. And you can give people, anyone who calls you, a recruiter or anybody else who's interested in your professional background, can now get real-time information and your resume-related information and LinkedIn profiles on the run. They don't have to be sitting at a computer to do this. You can give them a number, and when they're on the lunch break or driving somewhere, they can call and have a chat with your digital voice clone, your digital twin, to know everything there is to know about you that you want them to know about your professional history. Hope that was useful to you guys. I know that I use this a lot, and I loved really building this. It was a lot of fun. It was actually quite easy with Cartesia, and in subsequent videos, we'll go a bit deeper into some of the more advanced tools. I think I have another idea, some more functionality I want to add to my digital twin, including things like sending emails, so stay tuned for that. And so please follow us on socials, follow Cartesia, follow me, and I'll let you know when future material like this drops. This is here to help inspire you builders and developers to build amazing things with Cartesia voice agent technology and state-of-the-art voice models. All right, I'll see you next time. Have a great day.